The white envelope lay on the mahogany desk like a final whisper in the silence of the 42nd floor. 3 words written in elegant script across the front. For my board. Inside, a woman's careful handwriting detailed the transfer of assets, the dissolution of responsibilities, and an apology that would never be enough. What it didn't contain was hope. At 3 in the morning, when the city slept and shadows ruled the corporate tower, Marcus Rivera pushed his cleaning cart down the executive hallway, humming softly to drown out the weight of another sleepless night. He had no idea that in 60 seconds he would hold someone's life in his calloused hands, or that his choice would shatter everything both of them thought they knew about worth, dignity, and the space between giving up and holding on. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. Marcus Rivera had learned long ago that 3 in the morning belonged to 2 kinds of people, those running from something and those running towards something they'd never reach. At 34, he had been both. Tonight, like every night for the past 2 years, he was simply Marcus, the night janitor, the man who emptied trash bins filled with the dreams and debris of people who made more in an hour than he made in a month. The man whose hands, scarred from years of construction work before life took that away too, now held mops instead of hammers. His cleaning cart squeaked as he moved through the pristine halls of Meridian Financial Group, the sound echoing off glass walls that reflected the sleeping city below. 42 floors up, Manhattan looked like a circuit board of light and shadow, beautiful and distant as a photograph of someone else's life. Marcus checked his watch, a cheap digital thing that had survived 3 jobs and countless late nights. 3:15 in the morning. Emma would be sleeping now in their small apartment 20 minutes away, by subway, her 9-year-old face peaceful in a way that made his chest tight with protective love. She had fallen asleep on his lap earlier, homework spread across their thrift store coffee table, asking him why her math teacher said some people were naturally smarter than others. "Everyone's smart about different things, princess," he had told her, smoothing her dark hair. "Some people are smart about numbers. Some people are smart about people. You're smart about both." She had looked up at him with those serious brown eyes that belonged to someone much older. "What are you smart about, Daddy?" The question had lodged somewhere between his ribs like a splinter. What was he smart about? He had been smart about construction once, about reading blueprints and seeing how things fit together. Smart enough to run his own crew, to have health insurance and a retirement plan, and a future that made sense. But that was before the accident that crushed his left hand and scattered his crew to other jobs, before the medical bills that ate their savings, before he learned that being smart about building things meant nothing when your body could no longer do the work. Now he was smart about staying invisible, smart about keeping his head down and his opinions to himself, smart about getting to Emma's school plays and parent-teacher conferences despite working nights, smart about stretching $15 until it covered dinner and tomorrow's lunch. "You're smart about taking care of people." Emma had finally answered her own question, and the certainty in her voice had nearly undone him. The executive floor was different from the rest of the building, quieter. The carpet here was thicker, the furniture heavier, the air itself seeming to carry more weight. Marcus had been cleaning these offices for 2 years, and he knew their rhythms like a familiar song, who left coffee cups on their desk, who worked late enough to nod at him in the hallways, who treated him like part of the furniture. Most nights the corner office, the biggest one, with windows facing both north and east, was empty by the time he arrived. Victoria Chen, the CEO, was usually gone by 8, leaving behind the scent of expensive perfume and the ghost of decisions that moved millions of dollars. But tonight, light leaked from under her door. Marcus paused, one hand on his cart. In 2 years of working this floor, he had never seen anyone here this late. The building's security guard had mentioned that Ms. Chen had been staying later and later recently, but 3 in the morning was beyond late. This was the territory of insomnia and desperation. He should keep walking, mind his own business, finish his route and catch the 4:30 train home to Emma. He had learned the hard way that curiosity was a luxury he couldn't afford, but something made him stop. Maybe it was the quality of the silence, too thick and still. Maybe it was the way the light under the door seemed less like someone working and more like someone keeping vigil. Maybe it was just that Emma had taught him to notice when people needed help, even when they didn't ask for it. Marcus knocked softly on the door. "Ms. Chen, it's Marcus from cleaning. Are you okay?" No answer. He knocked again, louder this time. "Ms. Chen?" Still nothing. The rational part of his mind, the part that had kept him employed and out of trouble, told him to walk away. Whatever was happening in that office wasn't his problem. He was paid to empty trash and vacuum carpets, not to check on executives who could buy and sell him without thinking twice. But the part of him that was Emma's father, the part that still remembered what it felt like to build things instead of just cleaning up after them, reached for the door handle. It turned easily, unlocked. Victoria Chen sat behind her desk, perfectly still in the green glow of her computer monitor. For a moment, Marcus thought she had simply fallen asleep, her chin resting on her chest, her dark hair fallen forward like a curtain. But something about the scene felt wrong, too arranged, too final. His eyes found the white envelope on the desk before they found anything else. 3 words, in elegant script, "For my board." Understanding hit him like a physical blow. He had seen that kind of stillness before in the hospital room, where his own father had chosen silence over fighting. He recognized the terrible peace of someone who had made an irreversible decision. "Ms. Chen." His voice was hoarse, urgent. "Ms. Chen, can you hear me?" She stirred slightly, her head lifting just enough for him to see her face. Pale, unfocused, her lips barely moving as she whispered something he couldn't catch. Marcus dropped to his knees beside her chair, his mind racing through possibilities. Empty pill bottle on the desk, half-finished glass of water, the envelope that looked too much like a goodbye. "Stay with me," he said, his voice steadier than his hands, as he reached for her wrist, feeling for a pulse. Weak, but there. "I'm calling for help." His phone was in his hand before he finished the sentence, but Victoria's fingers closed around his wrist with surprising strength. "No," she whispered, "please, let me go." Marcus looked into her eyes, dark brown like Emma's, but empty of everything Emma's held. No curiosity, no hope, just an exhaustion so deep it seemed to have weight. "I can't do that," he said quietly, "and you know I can't." She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," Marcus said, already dialing 911 with his free hand. "I know you're somebody's daughter, probably somebody's friend. I know this building employs 3,000 people who depend on your decisions. And I know that whatever brought you to this moment, it's not permanent." Victoria's grip on his wrist loosened. "You don't understand. I've lost everything. The company, the trust, everything." "You haven't lost your life," Marcus said, holding her gaze while he spoke to the emergency dispatcher. "And as long as you have that, you can build everything else back." The paramedics arrived in what felt like hours but was probably minutes. As they worked, taking Victoria's vitals and asking questions Marcus couldn't answer, he stepped back into the shadows of the office and watched the woman who had seemed untouchable just moments before become suddenly, terrifyingly human. One of the paramedics, a young woman with kind eyes, glanced at Marcus. "Are you family?" "No," he said. I work here." "Well, you probably saved her life. If you hadn't found her when you did." She didn't need to finish the sentence. As they wheeled Victoria toward the elevator, she turned her head toward Marcus. Their eyes met across the distance of the office, across the gulf of everything that separated their worlds, and for just a moment, something passed between them. Not gratitude exactly, more like recognition. One person seeing another person, really seeing them, maybe for the first time. The elevator doors closed, and Marcus was alone, with the evidence of a life almost ended. The envelope on the desk, the empty pill bottle, the half-finished glass of water. He should call building security, let them handle the cleanup, go back to his cart and finish his route. Instead, he picked up the envelope. 3 words. "For my board." Inside, Victoria Chen's careful handwriting detailed the transfer of her company assets, the dissolution of her responsibilities, and an apology that seemed to echo with years of accumulated pain. She wrote about failure and disappointment, about letting people down, about the weight of expectations she could no longer carry. What struck Marcus wasn't the legal language or the financial details. It was the loneliness that bled through every line. This was a letter written by someone who believed they had to face everything alone. Someone who had forgotten, or maybe never learned, that reaching out wasn't the same as giving up. Marcus folded the letter carefully and slipped it into his pocket. He would return it eventually, but not yet. Right now, it felt too much like evidence of something that should never have happened. His shift ended at 6, but Marcus didn't go home. Instead, he sat in the hospital waiting room, still in his janitor's uniform, drinking coffee that tasted like regret and watching the sun rise over a city that never stopped moving. A doctor approached him around 7:30, a tired-looking man in scrubs who moved like someone carrying invisible weight. "Are you here about Victoria Chen?" Marcus nodded. "Is she?" "She's stable. The overdose wasn't severe, more of a cry for help than a genuine attempt, medically speaking, but she's been asking for someone named Marcus. Are you family?" Marcus almost laughed. "No, I'm nobody, just the guy who found her." The doctor studied him for a moment. Sometimes nobody is exactly who somebody needs. They let him see her for 10 minutes. Victoria looked small in the hospital bed, connected to monitors that beeped with mechanical certainty. Her eyes were clearer now, but still carrying that terrible emptiness he had seen in the office. "You came," she said, her voice hoarse. "Of course I came." "You don't even know me," she repeated, the same words she had spoken hours before. Marcus pulled a chair closer to the bed. "I know you tried to leave a letter instead of a conversation. I know you thought that was easier for everyone involved." Victoria's eyes filled with tears that she didn't let fall. It would have been. For who? The question hung between them, unanswered and unanswerable. Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out the envelope. Victoria's eyes widened as she recognized her own handwriting. "I read it," Marcus said quietly. "I hope you don't mind." She turned her face toward the window where morning light was painting the sky in shades of possibility. "Did you give it to them, to the board?" "No." "Why not?" Marcus considered the question seriously. "Because it's not finished." "What do you mean?" "You wrote about everything you've lost, everything you've failed at, but you didn't write about what you still have, what you could still build, what you could still become." Victoria laughed, but it was different this time. Less breaking glass, more like something cracked trying to heal. "You sound like a motivational poster." "I sound like someone who's been where you are," Marcus said. "Maybe not exactly, but close enough to know that the view from rock bottom includes the sky." She turned back to look at him, really look at him, for the first time since they had met. "Who are you, Marcus Rivera?" He could have given her the simple answer, the night janitor, the single father, the man with the broken hand and the broken dreams. Instead, he told her the truth. "I'm someone who knows what it's like to watch everything you've built fall apart. And I'm someone who learned that falling apart isn't the same as being broken beyond repair." Something shifted in Victoria's expression. Not hope exactly, but maybe the memory of hope. The recognition that hope was something that could exist, even if it felt impossible right now. "The company is finished," she said. "The board is going to vote me out. The shareholders are going to sue. Everything I've spent 15 years building is going to disappear." "Maybe," Marcus said, "but you're still here. And as long as you're here, you can build something new, maybe something better." Victoria closed her eyes, and for the first time since he had found her in that office, Marcus saw her breathing deepen into something that looked like rest instead of resignation. "I don't know how," she whispered. Marcus smiled, thinking of Emma asking him what he was smart about. "Start with staying alive. Build from there." The 10 minutes ended too quickly. As Marcus stood to leave, Victoria called his name. "Marcus?" He turned back. "Thank you," she said, "for seeing me when I couldn't see myself." Marcus nodded, but as he walked out of the hospital and into the bright morning, he knew the truth was more complicated than that. She had saved him too, in a way he was only beginning to understand. Emma had been right. He was smart about taking care of people. And maybe after 2 years of staying invisible, it was time to be seen again. The subway ride home gave him time to think about the letter in his pocket, about the woman in the hospital bed, about the choice he had made at 3 in the morning that changed everything for both of them. He thought about Emma, probably awake now and getting ready for school, making her own breakfast because Daddy worked nights and slept mornings. He thought about second chances and the space between giving up and holding on, about the way crisis sometimes cracked. People open just enough to let light in, about the strange mathematics of human connection, where helping someone else save their life somehow saved yours too. When he got home, Emma was sitting at their small kitchen table, homework spread in front of her, eating cereal from a bowl decorated with cartoon characters. "Hi, Daddy," she said without looking up from her math problems. "How was work?" Marcus kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her shampoo and the promise of a day ahead. "Different," he said. "Really different." Emma looked up at him with those serious brown eyes. Good different or bad different? Marcus thought about Victoria Chen in that hospital bed, about the letter in his pocket, about the way she had said his name like it meant something. "I'm not sure yet," he said, "but I think it might be the kind of different that changes things." Emma nodded solemnly as if this made perfect sense. At 9 years old, she already understood that some changes were too big to understand all at once. "Will you still be here when I get home from school?" "Always," Marcus said, and for the first time in months, the promise felt like more than just words. 3 days after finding Victoria Chen unconscious in her corner office, Marcus Rivera stood outside Meridian Financial Group at 2 in the afternoon, feeling like an imposter in his own clothes. He wore his only dress shirt, white, slightly wrinkled despite his careful ironing, and the black pants he saved for parent-teacher conferences and Emma's school performances. In his hand was a small paper bag containing something that had kept him awake for the past 72 hours. The lobby of Meridian was different in daylight, busier. The marble floors reflected the movement of people in expensive suits who walked like they owned the world, their conversations floating past him in fragments of numbers and acronyms he didn't understand. Security guards in crisp uniforms watched the flow of humanity, with professional disinterest, and Marcus wondered if they remembered the night when paramedics had wheeled their CEO out on a stretcher. He approached the reception desk where a young woman with perfect makeup and a practiced smile looked up at him. Her eyes took in his clothes, his calloused hands, the nervous way he shifted the paper bag from one hand to the other. "Can I help you?" The politeness was professional but distant, the tone reserved for people who clearly didn't belong in a place like this. "I'm here to see Victoria Chen," Marcus said, his voice steadier than he felt. "My name is Marcus Rivera." The receptionist's fingers moved across her keyboard with mechanical precision. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but I'm sorry, Ms. Chen isn't taking unscheduled meetings today." The smile never wavered, but it never reached her eyes either. "Would you like to leave a message?" Marcus felt heat rise to his cheeks. He had known this would happen, had prepared for it, but the reality of being dismissed still stung. In his world, when you wanted to talk to someone, you knocked on their door. You didn't need appointments or intermediaries or explanations of why you deserved 5 minutes of someone's time. "Could you tell her that Marcus from the night shift is here? I think she'll want to see me." The receptionist's expression shifted slightly, not warmer but more curious. She picked up her phone, spoke in low tones Marcus couldn't catch, then hung up with a look of surprise. "She'll see you, 42nd floor. The elevator bank is to your right." The ride to the 42nd floor felt longer than it should have, each floor number lighting up like a countdown to something Marcus wasn't sure he was ready for. When the doors opened, he stepped into the familiar territory of his night shift, but it looked different in daylight, less peaceful, more urgent. People moved through the hallways with purpose, their voices carrying the weight of decisions that affected thousands of lives. Victoria's office door was open, and she stood by the window looking out at the city below. She had changed since the hospital, still elegant, still carrying herself with the kind of confidence that came from years of being the smartest person in any room. But there was something different about her posture, less rigid, more human. "Marcus," she said, turning as he approached, "I wasn't sure you'd come." "I wasn't sure you'd see me," he replied, suddenly aware of how his voice echoed in the large space. "How are you feeling?" Victoria gestured to one of the chairs facing her desk, and Marcus sat down, the leather soft and expensive beneath him. "Better," embarrassed but better. She took her seat behind the mahogany desk, where just days ago he had found her suicide note. "The doctors say I'll be fine, physically anyway." Marcus reached into the paper bag and pulled out a small thermos, setting it carefully on the desk between them. "Emma wanted me to bring you this." Victoria looked at the thermos, then at Marcus, confusion clear on her face. "Emma? My daughter, she's 9. Marcus unscrewed the cap, and the scent of homemade chicken soup filled the office. "When I told her you'd been sick, she insisted on making soup, said it was the best medicine in the world." For a moment, Victoria just stared at the thermos, as if it were something from another planet. "Your daughter made me soup? She wanted to help. That's just who she is." Marcus's voice carried the pride of a father who had raised a child to see beyond herself. "She doesn't know what happened exactly, just that you needed help and I was able to give it." Victoria reached out and touched the thermos with the tips of her fingers. "When was the last time someone made me soup?" "I don't know. When was the last time you were sick?" "I don't get sick," Victoria said automatically, then stopped. "I mean, I don't let myself get sick. There's too much to do, too many people, depending on me to—" She caught herself again. "At least, there used to be." Marcus leaned forward slightly. "What happened? With the company, I mean, if you don't mind me asking." Victoria was quiet for so long that Marcus wondered if he had overstepped. In his world, You didn't pry into other people's business unless they invited you in. But something about the way she looked at him, like she was trying to decide whether he was real or just another hallucination brought on by medication, made him wait. 15 years, she said finally. I spent 15 years building Meridian from a small investment firm into one of the most respected financial groups in the country. $80 billion in assets under management, offices in 12 cities, 3,500 employees. She stood and walked to the window again, her reflection ghost-like in the glass. 3 weeks ago, we discovered that our head of operations had been embezzling funds, not just stealing, manipulating client accounts, falsifying reports, creating phantom investments. The loss is enormous, but the damage to our reputation. She shook her head. We're facing lawsuits, regulatory investigations, criminal charges. The board is meeting next week to vote on my resignation. Marcus absorbed this information slowly. He understood enough about business to know that what Victoria was describing was catastrophic, but the numbers she mentioned were so large they felt abstract. $80 billion, 3,500 employees. It was like trying to comprehend the distance to the moon. You didn't know, he said. It wasn't a question. I should have known. Victoria's voice was flat, matter-of-fact. I hired him. I trusted him. I created the environment where this could happen. Whether I knew or not is irrelevant. I'm responsible. Marcus thought about the letter in his pocket. He still carried it, though he wasn't sure why. Is that what your note said? That you were responsible? Victoria turned from the window, her eyes meeting his. Among other things. What were the other things? She sat down again, this time not behind her desk, but in the chair next to his, as if the mahogany barrier between them had become unnecessary. That I had failed everyone who trusted me, that my resignation would be better for the company than my presence, that I was tired of fighting battles I couldn't win. Marcus nodded slowly. He recognized the weight in her voice, the exhaustion that came from carrying too much for too long. You know what Emma asked me yesterday? What? She asked me why people say, I'm sorry when someone dies. Like, why do we apologize for something we didn't do? Marcus smiled slightly. She's been thinking about it since her hamster died last month, Mr. Whiskers. Victoria's lips twitched in what might have been the beginning of a smile. What did you tell her? That saying, I'm sorry, doesn't always mean I apologize. Sometimes it means I'm sad this happened. Sometimes it means I wish I could take your pain away. Sometimes it just means I see you and I care. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the conversation settling between them like dust in sunlight. Why did you come here today? Victoria asked. Really? Marcus considered the question. He could have given her the simple answer, to check on her, to deliver Emma's soup, to return the letter he still carried in his pocket. But sitting there in her office looking at this woman who had seemed untouchable just days ago and now seemed almost fragile, he realized the truth was more complicated. Because I've been where you are, he said. Not exactly, but close enough. What do you mean? Marcus took a breath, feeling the familiar tightness in his chest that came with talking about the before times. I used to run my own construction company, Rivera Construction. Nothing huge, but it was mine. I had 8 guys working for me, steady contracts, a reputation for doing good work on time and under budget. Victoria listened without interrupting, her attention complete in a way that made Marcus feel like his words mattered. 5 years ago, I was working on a renovation project downtown. Old building, tricky foundation work. I was in the basement when a support beam gave way. Marcus flexed his left hand unconsciously, the scars pale against his skin. Crushed my hand. Broke 4 bones, severed 2 tendons. The doctors put it back together, but it's not the same. Can't grip properly, can't handle heavy tools for long periods. I'm sorry, Victoria said, and Marcus heard the different meanings Emma had talked about woven through the words. The medical bills were brutal. No insurance. I was self-employed, couldn't afford the premiums. Workers' comp covered some of it, but not everything, not enough. Marcus's voice stayed steady, but Victoria could see the cost of the telling in his eyes. I had to lay off my crew, couldn't take on new projects, spent 2 years trying to find work, but nobody wants a construction foreman who can't lift a beam or operate heavy machinery. So you became a janitor. I became a man who could be home when his daughter needed him, Marcus corrected gently. The work isn't glamorous, but it's honest. And it's flexible. I'm there when Emma gets home from school. I'm there for parent-teacher conferences and school plays and the nights when she has bad dreams. Victoria's eyes were bright with something that might have been tears. Do you miss it, the construction work? Every day, Marcus said without hesitation. But I learned something important when everything fell apart. Your work isn't who you are, your job isn't your worth. And losing everything you thought mattered doesn't mean you've lost everything that actually matters. Easy to say when you have someone to come home to, Victoria said, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus studied her face, the careful makeup that couldn't quite hide the exhaustion, the expensive clothes that seemed to wear her instead of the other way around, the way she held herself like someone who had forgotten how to be still. Tell me about your family, he said. Victoria laughed, but there was no humor in it. What family? My parents died in a car accident when I was in college. No siblings, no husband. I was married for 3 years, but Richard couldn't handle the hours I worked. Said I loved the company more than I loved him. She paused. He wasn't wrong. Kids? We tried for a while, but Victoria's voice trailed off. The timing was never right. There was always another merger, another acquisition, another crisis that needed my attention. And then Richard left, and I threw myself even deeper into work because it was the only thing I was good at. Marcus felt a familiar ache in his chest. Not pity exactly, but recognition. The loneliness in Victoria's voice was different from his own, but just as real. His loneliness came from loss. Hers came from never having built the connections in the first place. What do you do when you're not working? He asked. Victoria looked at him as if the question didn't make sense. I'm always working. But when you're not? Weekends, evenings, holidays? I work weekends. Evenings too, usually. And holidays are just quieter days at the office. Marcus shook his head slowly. Victoria, when was the last time you did something just because you wanted to? Something that had nothing to do with business or profit or responsibility? She was quiet for so long that Marcus wondered if she had heard the question. When she finally spoke, her voice was small and uncertain. I don't remember. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. The afternoon stretched between them, filled with conversations that neither of them had expected to have. Victoria told Marcus about the early days of Meridian, when she worked 18-hour days and slept on the office couch more often than her own bed. About the first major client she landed through sheer persistence and caffeine-fueled determination. About the gradual realization that success had become a prison she had built herself. Marcus told her about Emma's first day of school, when she had cried because her shoes were from the thrift store and the other kids might notice. About the night Emma had asked why they didn't have a mommy like other families, and how he had struggled to explain loss to someone too young to understand it. About the small victories, good report cards, successful school projects, bedtime conversations, that reminded him why everything else was worth it. "She sounds remarkable," Victoria said, her voice warm with something Marcus was beginning to recognize as genuine interest. "Emma, I mean. She is. Sometimes I think she's raising me as much as I'm raising her." Marcus smiled. "She has this way of seeing the world that's just clearer than the rest of us. Last week she asked me why rich people always look sad in the newspapers. Said it doesn't make sense because having money should make you happy." "What did you tell her?" "That money can solve some problems, but it can't solve the important ones. Can't make you feel less lonely or give you people to love or help you sleep better at night." Marcus glanced around Victoria's office, taking in the expensive furniture and the view that probably cost more than he made in a year. "Can't tell you who you are when everything you've built disappears." Victoria followed his gaze, seeing her office, her life, through his eyes. "You think I'm lost. I think you forgot that there's a difference between losing everything and having nothing left." Marcus leaned forward. "You lost your company, your reputation, maybe your career, but you didn't lose your intelligence, your experience, your ability to learn from mistakes and build something better. And if the board votes me out, if the lawsuits destroy what's left of Meridian, if I can never work in finance again, then you figure out what comes next," Marcus said simply. "That's what people do. They fall down, they get back up, they try something else." Victoria shook her head. "You make it sound easy." "It's not easy, it's just possible." Marcus stood, checking his watch. "I need to go pick up Emma from school." "But Victoria?" She looked up at him. "The soup needs to be heated before you drink it. And Emma wanted me to tell you that chicken soup works better if you eat it with someone, not alone." As Marcus reached the door, Victoria called after him. "Marcus?" He turned. "Thank you, for the soup, for listening, for—" She gestured helplessly. "For seeing me." Marcus smiled. "You're worth seeing." The elevator ride down felt different than the ride up. Lighter, somehow, as if something heavy had been left behind in that office. As Marcus walked through the lobby past the marble floors and the people in expensive suits, he thought about the woman 42 floors above him, eating soup made by a 9-year-old girl who believed in the healing power of kindness. He thought about the letter still in his pocket, about second chances and the space between falling down and staying down, about the strange mathematics of human connection, where sometimes the person you're trying to save ends up saving you right back. When he emerged onto the street, the afternoon sunlight felt warmer than it had in weeks. He had 20 minutes to get to Emma's school, and for the first time in days, he found himself walking faster not because he was late, but because he had something to tell her, something about soup and kindness and the way helping others sometimes helped you remember who you were meant to be. The next evening, Marcus arrived at work to find an envelope waiting for him at the security desk. His name was written across the front in the same elegant script he recognized from Victoria's suicide note, but this handwriting was steadier, more certain. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a message that made him smile. "Marcus, thank you for the soup. Emma was right. It worked better shared than alone. Would you and Emma like to have dinner tomorrow? Nothing fancy, just a chance for me to say thank you properly, and maybe learn how to make soup." Victoria P.S. I've been thinking about what you said about money not solving the important problems. I'd like to try solving some problems differently if you're willing to help me figure out how. Marcus folded the note carefully and slipped it into his pocket next to the suicide letter he still carried. 2 pieces of paper from the same woman, written just days apart but representing completely different futures. He pulled out his phone and typed a simple reply. "Dinner sounds good. Emma would love to teach you about soup, and about a lot of other things too, probably. Fair warning, she asks a lot of questions. Marcus, the response came back almost immediately. Good, I have a lot to learn. As Marcus pushed his cleaning cart down the familiar hallways of Meridian Financial Group, he thought about the woman in the corner office who was probably working late again, but maybe for different reasons than before. About a 9-year-old girl who believed soup could heal anything. About the space between losing everything and having nothing left, and how sometimes that space was just wide enough for something new to grow. His phone buzzed with another text from Victoria. One more thing, I wanted you to know that I'm not resigning. The board can vote me out if they choose to, but I'm not running away anymore. Thought you should know since you're the one who taught me the difference. Marcus smiled as he typed his reply. Emma's going to love hearing that. She doesn't believe in giving up on good people. Is that what I am? A good person? Marcus paused, thinking about the letter in his pocket, about 3 in the morning and a woman who had lost hope, about soup made with love by a child who had never met her, about the conversation in an office where 2 different worlds had collided and somehow created something new. Getting there, he typed. We all are. The rest of his shift passed quietly, but it was a different kind of quiet than before. Not the silence of loneliness, but the peace that came from knowing that tomorrow would bring something worth looking forward to, something that felt like the beginning of a story neither of them could have written alone. Upstairs in her office, Victoria Chen sat by the window looking out at the city lights, the empty thermos beside her and a decision in her heart that felt like the first real choice she had made in years. In a few hours, Marcus Rivera would go home to his daughter, who would ask him about his day and listen to his answer like it was the most important thing in the world. And somewhere in the space between their 2 worlds, something was taking root that looked suspiciously like hope. The dinner was supposed to be simple. Just Victoria, Marcus, and Emma, sharing a meal in Victoria's penthouse apartment, a chance for Emma to teach the CEO how to make proper chicken soup, and for Victoria to practice being a person instead of a position. But as Marcus stood outside the gleaming downtown building 3 blocks from Meridian Financial, Emma's small hand in his, he felt the familiar weight of not belonging pressing against his chest. The doorman looked at them with barely concealed suspicion. A maintenance worker and his daughter clearly didn't fit the building's usual demographic. But when Marcus gave Victoria's name, the man's expression shifted to professional courtesy, and they were ushered inside with the kind of deference reserved for people important enough to summon. The elevator to the 45th floor was silent except for Emma's excited chatter about the soup recipe she had written out in her careful 9-year-old handwriting. She clutched the paper like a treasure map, her eyes bright with the kind of hope that came from believing the world was fundamentally good and that sharing soup could fix anything. Remember what we talked about, Marcus said gently as they rose through the building. Ms. Chen has had a really hard time lately. She's learning how to be happy again. Emma nodded solemnly. Like when I had to learn how to ride my bike after I fell and got scared. Exactly like that. The elevator opened directly into Victoria's apartment, and Emma's gasp of wonder was audible. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Manhattan, the city spreading out below them like a field of stars. The furniture was modern and expensive, all clean lines and muted colors, but the space felt more like a showroom than a home. Beautiful but untouched, perfect but cold. Victoria appeared from what Marcus assumed was the kitchen, wearing jeans and a simple sweater that made her look younger, more approachable. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and for the first time since he had known her, she looked like someone who might actually live in the space around her, instead of just occupying it. "Emma," Victoria said, her voice warm with genuine pleasure, "I'm so glad you came, and thank you for the soup recipe. I've been looking forward to learning how to make it." Emma beamed and held up her carefully written paper. "I wrote down all the steps, and Daddy says you have a really nice kitchen, so it should be even better than when we make it at home." Victoria glanced at Marcus with something that might have been embarrassment. "I should probably warn you, I don't actually cook much. The kitchen is mostly for show." "That's okay," Emma said with the confidence of someone who had never met a problem she couldn't solve. "Cooking is just like following directions, and the most important ingredient isn't even in the recipe." "What's that?" "Love," Emma said matter-of-factly. "You have to love the person you're cooking for, or it doesn't taste right." Victoria's expression softened into something Marcus was beginning to recognize as wonder, the look of someone discovering that the world contained more kindness than she had remembered. The next hour passed in a way that felt almost magical. Emma directed the soup-making process with the authority of a seasoned chef, guiding Victoria through each step with patient enthusiasm. Marcus found himself relaxing in a way he hadn't expected, watching his daughter teach a billionaire CEO how to dice onions, and explaining why you had to let the soup simmer slowly for the flavors to properly blend. "It's like making friends," Emma told Victoria as they stirred the pot together. "You can't rush it, or it doesn't work right. You have to be patient and let it happen naturally." Victoria glanced at Marcus over Emma's head, and he saw understanding pass across her features. His daughter wasn't just teaching her to cook, she was teaching her something about connection, about the slow work of building trust and intimacy. They were just sitting down to eat when Victoria's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and her face went pale. "I'm sorry, I need to take this," she said, stepping into the next room. Through the open doorway, Marcus could hear fragments of a conversation that seemed to drain the warmth from the apartment. Board meeting moved up to tomorrow, emergency session, voting tonight. When Victoria returned, the ease of the evening had vanished. She looked like someone who had just received a death sentence. "I have to go," she said, her voice carefully controlled. "There's been a development with the company. The board is meeting tonight instead of next week." Emma looked up from her soup, confusion clear on her young face. "But we just started eating." Victoria knelt beside Emma's chair, her hands shaking slightly. "I know, sweetheart. I'm so sorry. This was the most fun I've had in a very long time. But sometimes grown-ups have to handle things that can't wait." "Is someone in trouble?" Emma asked with the direct insight of childhood. Victoria's smile was strained. "Yes, someone is in very big trouble." Marcus watched Victoria gather her things, saw the way she moved like someone preparing for battle. The relaxed woman who had been learning to make soup was gone, replaced by the CEO who carried the weight of thousands of jobs on her shoulders. "Victoria," he said as she reached for her coat, "do you want us to come with you?" She stopped, turning to look at him with surprise. "To a board meeting?" "For moral support. We could wait outside or—" "Marcus, you don't understand. These people, they're not like us. They're going to destroy me tonight, professionally and personally. They're going to make an example of me that will follow me for the rest of my career." Her voice was steady, but Marcus could see the fear beneath it. "I can't ask you to be part of that." Emma stood up from her chair, her soup forgotten. "Ms. Chen, are you scared?" Victoria looked at the little girl for a long moment. "Yes, Emma, I'm very scared." "My daddy taught me something about being scared," Emma said, walking over to take Victoria's hand. "He said being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the right thing even when you are scared." Victoria's eyes filled with tears that she didn't let fall. "What if I don't know what the right thing is anymore?" "Then you do your best and trust that it will be okay." Emma said with the absolute certainty of someone who had never yet been betrayed by hope. Marcus stood up, decision crystallizing in his chest. "We're coming with you." "Marcus, no. You don't understand what you're saying." "I understand that you're about to walk into the hardest moment of your professional life, and nobody should have to do that alone." Marcus looked around the beautiful, empty apartment. "Besides, Emma's right. We're your friends now. That's what friends do." The ride to Meridian Financial took place in the back of a hired car that felt more like a hearse than transportation. Victoria sat rigid beside Marcus, her hands clenched in her lap, while Emma chattered nervously about the soup they had left behind and whether it would still be good when they got back. "Victoria," Marcus said quietly, "what's the worst thing that can happen tonight?" "They vote me out, terminate my contract, sue me personally for the losses caused by the embezzlement, destroy my reputation so thoroughly that I can never work in finance again." Her voice was flat, reciting facts like a medical diagnosis. "And then what?" Victoria looked at him like he had asked what happened after death. "I don't know. I've never thought past that point." "Then maybe that's where you start," Marcus said, "with what comes after." The 42nd floor of Meridian was busier than Marcus had ever seen it, even during his night shifts. Board members and lawyers moved through the hallways with grim purpose, their conversations hushed but urgent. Security guards stood at strategic points, and Marcus could feel the tension that preceded corporate executions. They found a small waiting area near the conference room where the board would meet. Through the glass walls, Marcus could see a long table, surrounded by chairs that looked more like thrones than furniture. This was where Victoria's professional life would end, where 15 years of building and achieving would be reduced to a vote and a press release. Emma sat between Marcus and Victoria on the leather couch, her legs swinging freely, her presence a reminder that there was a world outside this building where different things mattered. "Ms. Chen," Emma said suddenly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "If they say you can't work here anymore, what would you want to do instead?" Victoria was quiet for so long that Marcus wondered if she had heard the question. When she finally spoke, her voice was distant, thoughtful. "I used to want to be a teacher," she said, "before business school, before Meridian, before everything got so complicated. I wanted to teach math to kids who thought they weren't smart enough to understand it." "Why didn't you?" Emma asked, with the directness that only children possessed. "Because teaching didn't pay enough to pay back my student loans. Because everyone said I was too smart to waste my time in a classroom. Because I was scared of failing at something that mattered to me." Victoria's laugh was soft and sad. "So I chose something that paid well but didn't matter as much, thinking I could always go back to teaching later." "But you never did," Marcus said gently. "There was always something more urgent, always another deal, another crisis, another reason to postpone the things I actually wanted to do." Victoria looked at Emma. "That's not a very smart way to live, is it?" Emma shook her head solemnly. "My daddy says life is too short to do things that don't make you happy." "Your daddy is a wise man." The conference room doors opened and Victoria's assistant, a young man who looked like he hadn't slept in days, approached them with the careful gait of someone delivering bad news. "Ms. Chen, they're ready for you." Victoria stood, smoothing her skirt with hands that trembled slightly. For a moment she looked exactly like what she was, a woman about to walk into a room where people who had once respected her were preparing to end her career. Emma stood too and hugged Victoria around the waist, her small arms fierce with protective love. "Remember," Emma whispered, "being brave means doing the right thing even when you're scared." Victoria hugged her back, and when she straightened, something had changed in her posture. She looked less like someone going to her execution and more like someone going to tell the truth. "Thank you," she said to Marcus, "both of you, for reminding me who I want to be." Marcus watched her walk toward the conference room, her back straight, her step sure. Through the glass walls, he could see the board members, 12 people in expensive suits, who held Victoria's future in their hands. He saw her take her seat at the head of the table, saw her open a folder and begin to speak. "What's happening in there?" Emma asked, pressing her face to the glass. "Ms. Chen is fighting for something important," Marcus said. "Not just her job, but her right to make mistakes and learn from them." They couldn't hear what Victoria was saying, but they could see her speaking with passion, her hands moving as she made her case. Some of the board members leaned forward, engaged. Others looked skeptical, arms crossed. One man, older with silver hair and a face like stone, looked openly hostile. The meeting stretched for what felt like hours. Emma fell asleep against Marcus's shoulder, and he held her while watching the drama unfold in the glass room. At one point, Victoria stood and walked to a whiteboard, drawing diagrams and writing numbers with the confidence of someone who knew her material. She wasn't just defending herself, Marcus realized. She was presenting a plan. Finally, the board members began filing out. Some nodded to Victoria as they left. Others avoided her eyes entirely. The silver-haired man stopped to say something that made Victoria's jaw tighten, but she nodded politely and shook his hand. Victoria emerged from the conference room looking exhausted but not defeated. She walked slowly toward Marcus and Emma, her expression unreadable. "Well?" Marcus asked softly. Victoria sat down beside them and gently brushed a strand of hair from Emma's sleeping face. "They voted," she said, 7-5, against my resignation." Marcus felt something release in his chest. Relief and pride mixed together. "They're keeping you?" "On probation, with conditions. I have to accept a 50% salary reduction for the next 2 years. I have to implement new oversight protocols that essentially mean every major decision I make will be reviewed by a committee. And I have to personally guarantee the recovery of the embezzled funds, which means if we don't get that money back, I'll be financially ruined." Marcus studied her face. "But you're staying." "I'm staying." Victoria's smile was tired but real. "I presented them with a 5-year plan for rebuilding client trust, restructuring our oversight processes, and turning Meridian into the kind of company people can believe in again. It's going to be the hardest thing I've ever done." "You could have taken the resignation," Marcus pointed out. "Walked away, started over somewhere else." "I could have," Victoria agreed, "but someone very smart recently told me that falling down isn't the same as being broken beyond repair. And someone even smarter told me that being brave means doing the right thing, even when you're scared." Emma stirred in Marcus's arms, blinking sleepily. "Is Ms. Chen okay?" "She's more than okay," Marcus said, looking at Victoria with something that might have been pride. "She's brave." The ride back to Victoria's apartment was different from the ride to the office. The weight of dread had been replaced by something lighter, but no less significant. Victoria had chosen the harder path, staying to rebuild instead of running away to start over. It was a choice that would define not just her career, but who she wanted to be. The soup was still warm when they returned, and they ate it by candlelight while Emma regaled Victoria with stories about school and friends and the small dramas of 9-year-old life. Victoria listened with the attention of someone learning a new language, asking questions about homework and playground politics, with the same focus she had once reserved for market analyses. "Ms. Chen," Emma said as they finished eating, "can I tell you something?" "Of course." "I'm proud of you for being brave tonight." Victoria's eyes filled with tears that she finally let fall. Thank you, Emma. That means more to me than you know. Later, as Marcus and Emma prepared to leave, Victoria walked them to the elevator. The apartment behind her still looked like a showroom, but something about it felt different, lived in, as if someone actually existed there instead of just sleeping between meetings. Marcus, Victoria said as the elevator doors opened, I want to ask you something, and I want you to think about it before you answer. Okay. I'm going to need help rebuilding Meridian, not just financially, but culturally. I want to create a company where people like you, people with integrity and perspective, and the ability to see what others miss, have a voice in how decisions are made. Marcus felt Emma's hand slip into his, her way of offering support for whatever came next. I'm offering you a position, Director of Employee Relations. Your job would be to make sure we never lose sight of the people behind the numbers, to ensure that every policy we implement takes into account how it affects the lives of our employees. Victoria paused. It would mean leaving the night shift, working days, being part of the executive team. Marcus stared at her, speechless. The offer was everything he had lost when his construction company failed, everything he had stopped dreaming about when he accepted that cleaning offices was his new reality. I can't give you an answer tonight, he said finally. I wouldn't want you to. This isn't just about you. It affects Emma too. Talk it over with her. Think about what it would mean for your family. Victoria smiled. But know this, I'm not offering this because I feel sorry for you or because I owe you something. I'm offering it because you're exactly the kind of person I need if I'm going to build something worth believing in. The elevator doors began to close, but Victoria held them open for one more moment. Thank you, she said, for seeing me when I couldn't see myself, for bringing Emma into my life, for teaching me that being successful isn't the same as being worthy. As the elevator descended, Emma looked up at Marcus with those serious brown eyes. Are you going to say yes, Daddy? Marcus considered the question. Upstairs, Victoria Chen was probably sitting in her beautiful empty apartment, planning the hardest fight of her professional life. Tomorrow, he would return to his night shift, pushing a cleaning cart through hallways where people barely noticed him. But something had fundamentally changed in both of their worlds. I don't know yet, Princess, he said. What do you think I should do? Emma was quiet for a moment, her 9-year-old mind working through complications that would challenge adults. I think, she said finally, that Ms. Chen needs people who care about her around. And I think you're good at helping people. And I think... She paused, choosing her words carefully. I think maybe this is what Mommy would want you to do. Help people and be proud of your work. Marcus knelt down to Emma's level, looking into eyes that held more wisdom than should fit in someone so young. You know what I think? He said. What? I think your mom would be proud of the little girl who taught a CEO how to make soup and helped her remember how to be brave. Emma smiled, the expression bright enough to light up the elevator. So we're going to help Ms. Chen? Marcus stood, taking his daughter's hand as the elevator reached the ground floor. Outside, the city spread around them like a promise of possibility. Somewhere above them, Victoria Chen was probably working late into the night, preparing to rebuild an empire with integrity as its foundation. Somewhere ahead of them lay choices that would reshape both of their futures. Yeah, Princess, Marcus said as they stepped out into the Manhattan evening. I think we are. 6 months later, Marcus Rivera sat in his new office on the 38th floor of Meridian Financial, looking out at a view he had once only seen while emptying trash cans. His title was engraved on a nameplate that still felt surreal, Director of Employee Relations. His job was exactly what Victoria had promised, to ensure that the company never lost sight of the human cost of its decisions. The work was challenging in ways that construction had never been. Instead of reading blueprints, he read people. Instead of building structures, he built policies that protected dignity and promoted fairness. Instead of managing a crew of 8, he oversaw programs that affected thousands of employees. But the most rewarding part of his new role was watching Victoria transform from the isolated CEO who had almost given up on life to a leader who understood that true success was measured not just in profits, but in the well-being of the people who generated them. The Meridian Second Chance program, which Victoria had launched 3 months earlier, had already hired 47 people who had been written off by other companies. Former inmates, long-term unemployed, workers who had been displaced by automation, all of them finding new purpose in jobs that valued their potential over their past. Emma, now 10 and wiser than ever, had become something of a legend at Meridian. Employees knew her as the girl who had taught their CEO how to make soup and how to be human again. She still visited the office regularly, usually sitting in Marcus's office doing homework while he worked late. "Daddy," Emma said one evening as Marcus finished reviewing applications for the Second Chance program, "do you think Ms. Chen is happy now?" Marcus looked across the hallway to Victoria's office, where she was having dinner with her brother and his family, people she had reconnected with after years of putting work before relationships. Through the glass, he could see her laughing at something her nephew had said. Her face relaxed in a way he had never seen during those first dark days. "Yeah, Princess," he said. "I think she's getting there." "Good," Emma said, returning to her math homework with satisfaction. Everyone deserves to be happy. That night, as Marcus and Emma rode the subway home to their new apartment, still modest, but in a better neighborhood with better schools, Marcus thought about the letter that had started everything. The suicide note he had found on Victoria's desk 6 months earlier, filled with despair and apology and the terrible certainty that the world would be better without her. He had returned it to Victoria 2 weeks earlier, on the day she had been officially confirmed as permanent CEO, following a unanimous board vote. She had read it silently, then folded it carefully and placed it in her desk drawer. "Why are you keeping it?" he had asked. "To remember," she had said. "To remember how close I came to missing everything that matters. To remember that falling down isn't the same as being finished. And to remember that sometimes the person who saves your life is the one you least expect," Marcus had added. Victoria had smiled, the expression bright with hard-earned hope. "No," she had said. "To remember that sometimes saving someone else's life is exactly what you need to save your own." Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story. As the subway train carried them through the tunnel beneath the city, Marcus held Emma's hand and thought about second chances and the space between falling down and getting back up. About the strange mathematics of human connection, where helping someone else find their way somehow showed you your own path. About a note that had nearly been an ending, but had turned out to be a beginning instead. Outside the train windows, Manhattan rushed past in a blur of light and possibility. Above them, in offices and apartments and places where people were learning to see each other clearly, life continued with all its messy, complicated, beautiful potential for transformation. And somewhere in the space between worlds that had once seemed too far apart to bridge, a CEO and a janitor and a 9-year-old girl who believed in the healing power of soup had discovered that the most important construction project of all was building connections that could withstand anything, even despair, even failure, even the terrible weight of believing you had to carry everything alone. The train pulled into their station, and Marcus and Emma emerged into the night air, walking hand in hand toward home. Behind them, the city glowed with the light of millions of stories still being written, Millions of chances for people to see each other clearly and choose connection over isolation, hope over despair. And in that choice, in that simple decision to reach out when someone needs help, lay all the difference between an ending and a beginning, between falling down and staying down, between being alone and being seen. The note that could have been Victoria Chen's last words had become instead the first words of a story about what happens when people who seem to have nothing in common discover they have everything that matters: the capacity to care for each other, the courage to keep trying, and the wisdom to know that no one has to face their darkest moments alone. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.